I'm Robin Smith, and today Fresh Lev White is joining us for a teaching, Perfect as We Are, a self-compassion practice. Thanks for being here. Just a big shout out to everyone in this community who keeps showing up to be Sangha and showing up for the practice of Buddhist recovery. I'd like to tell you a little bit about our teacher, Lev. Fresh Lev White is a love and compassionate activist. He offers mindfulness, coaching, mediation, and diversity trainings as tools for shifting towards more authentic, conscious, and passionate living. He teaches and writes about how love and self-compassion are ultimate gateways to loving and understanding others, thus healing our communities and our planet. In recovery since 2012 and growing up in a diverse part of New York City, Lev can meet people where they are when offering Dharma, in mediation, and while engaged in facilitating trans, GNC, and LGBTQIA ally trainings. Lev's teachings focus on self-compassion, self-acceptance, and the belief that if we can love no matter what, we can make positive change personally in all areas of our life with wise strategy. Lev, or Fresh, as we know him, is contributor to Real World Mindfulness for Beginners, Transcending Trans Buddhist Voices, the October 2019 edition, and Trans Bodies, Trans Selves. And I'm actually going to put the titles of the publications in the chat field as well. So without further commentary, we invite our teacher on. Welcome, Fresh. So happy to have you here.
Thank you so much, Robin. Hi. I like to, if I say it now that I'm nervous, it helps. So hi, everybody. It's weird not seeing everybody. So I've done lots of, or a few Zoom rooms with faces. So I'm just going to imagine you there. And welcome and thank you for attending today. So hi, oh, there's a face. Hey, face. And know that I can't read, and I have my glass. I'm like, I can't read your name, but I'll follow up later. So yeah, today I want to talk a little bit about some self-compassion practices. I'll share a bit of my story and talk about how recovery has supported me, that path, and then offer some practice. So I actually thought, and I realized I don't, like, who carries a clock or a watch? So I'll be turning occasionally towards my computer that has a timer on it. But let's see if there's anything else I want to say before I get started. Just that I feel really fortunate to be here, and in a lot of ways, it's a really big deal. I don't know that the projection of my life, especially in my youth, would be that I would live to be the age that I am, and B, that I would do so without, or I would be able to be here and be able to basically articulate anything, much less be able to offer healing that I believe that I came into the world with and really enjoy sharing. So I thought, let's ground for, let's take just a few minutes to ground. I'll tell my story, and then we'll do a longer meditation, and then we'll come back and do a practice. I think that might work well for us this morning. So I've got my bells. So the invitation is to be able to ground in, whatever that might mean for you. For some of you, that'll be sitting, standing, lying down. For some of you, it might be movement. So there is no one way to practice, just whatever can help you stay present. So yeah, I'll ring the bell and begin. And I'll get less nervous as we go. You'll know the difference. So perhaps taking in a deep breath, and whatever that might be for you, deep might actually be shallow, so comfortable for your body. If it's accessible, being able to fill your diaphragm as you're inhaling, as you're exhaling, releasing your shoulders. Inhaling as well, see if you can open your chest to your comfort level, really letting the air in. Exhaling, allowing your elbows to fall towards the ground. And in this moment, noticing the sensations in your hands. Feeling the weight of your body in your seat or in your standing position against the ground. Just feeling the earth holding you. And getting a sense of how your feet are doing, if they're accessible to feeling what's happening there. Coolness, stiffness, numbness. Without judgment, just noticing. And as you're inhaling, perhaps imagining filling your whole body with breath. And as you're releasing from the top down, allowing muscles to relax, tension to go. Perhaps on this next exhale, you can release anything you don't need in this moment. Anything that might be tugging at your mind that really you don't need to worry about right now. And for some of you, you may already experience the breath filling your whole body. You can feel your whole body breathing. And for others, our minds are just racing. And so the practice is just to be with what is, with as much kindness as possible. And gently coming back to your breath or sensations in your body. So welcome back. Thank you for your practice. And if you haven't yet, I don't know how many of you are on there, give each other a wave. Usually when I'm in the room with people, I have them introduce themselves. So just give each other a wave, saying hello. So I'm going to share a little bit of my journey. And right now I'm coming out of what one of my Dharma siblings described to me last year. I didn't know have a term for it. It's called the Cyclical Depression. So I'm just coming out of that, and I'm going to share, just go through some dates about what happened in my life, and I'll go back and forth, but you'll get it. And take care of yourself as you're listening. So in that way, it might be, feel free to touch your belly or your heart if you are activated in some way. Feel free to shut off and come back. I'm so aware that I'm in a space with survivors. So I know that you already know how to take care of yourself, even as it's something that we continue to work through, and we'll continue to work through in our lives. So I have this period where literally, I would say it ended on Monday. And probably by Wednesday, my whole world opened up. So I'm going to go by, let's start. So on January 16th, I was born and I was orphaned. And for those first 6 months, I don't know anything about my story. And so there's some pain around that, the not knowing. And then 6 months later, I was fostered by a family. I'm very grateful. I was fostered by a family. And by the time I was 5, I started wetting the bed. And I was already getting beat as a kid, but the beatings were much more aggressive at that age. And so I'm speaking now just for the little one in me that hasn't had a lot of voice. And so I was going back and forth to a doctor, which of course more trauma means that I was being, there were lots of examinations and nothing showed up for like a year. So it's hard to describe the memories that I have of that little kid, right? Who was wetting the bed and getting beat up. By the time I was 6, they figured out, oh yeah, here's this thing that we couldn't find. And so I had my first major operation at 6 years old. That was a pretty traumatizing period for me, and I didn't stop peeing right away, so there was more torture around that. And then by the time and then life goes on. I had my experience with life was that I had this family that was very loving and really, really providing for me, and yet they came in with their own traumas around how they were raised and what they understood. So of course, as children, we receive what they offer from their own learning and experience. So I remember coming back from sleepaway camp, which was pretty amazing, at 10, and being told we were going to move. And it was around this time or a little bit earlier that I found out that my mom had cancer. And she had had cancer for 3 or 4 years, but she was misdiagnosed, which was, from my understanding, was and still is a common experience for African-American people. We just don't get the same amount of care. There was trauma around that, but I'm going to keep going. So in October, which is when my depression begins, in October, or around that time, we were adopted by that family. It was me and a younger sibling. So I'll just stay with I. So I was adopted by that family because my mom didn't want us to go into the system. I don't know how my dad felt about it at the time, but so that was in October. And then, the memories come up again in December. That's living in my body. January has the experience of, the birth and the separation that's living in my body. On January 15th is my dad's birthday. I'm sorry, January 15th All right. So yeah, January 15th is the anniversary of my dad's death, actually. And then February 24th is the anniversary of my mom's death. And so I've skipped a little bit, but it's sort of like I've got this period from October to February that's really defined my life in ways that I didn't understand. So some of the things that have come out for me was ADD comes from some of those experiences of being physically abused. I have no problem saying that as a child, and then later neglected. So my dad actually, so my mom died when I was 11, and my dad was around till I was 21, but he neglected me in lots of ways. So what, and then comes the alcohol. So I grew up at a time when dad comes home and has a drink, and the family members have lots of drinking going on. There's lots of drunken parties as drunkenness, and I see this, and I'm curious about this, and by the time I'm 12, I'm already indulging myself. Let's see. So 12 was the first time I got drunk. I'm trying to see where I want to go. Otherwise, we'll be here all day, and I don't want to do that. So between the physical abuse, the neglect, and then my own drinking, I began to, that behavior enough was already setting me on a dangerous path. But I think I want to roll back and say that through this experience, I've been someone who has always chosen to have compassion for the people around me. And even as I was being harmed, I didn't stop loving anyone. And I think part of that comes from what we may do as children, because they're our caretakers. But some of that also comes from an innateness in me that just never went away. So that jumping forward, well, from 12, by 16, I'm bouncing, and I'm already self-employed. I'm bouncing, I'm out of the house, taking care of myself, in more relationships that are, my first relationship was actually abusive. And, but I moved on from there. I went to college. I met other loving beings. I had a beautiful partner at the time, but also the whole time, I didn't spend a lot of time looking at my traumas, investigating my traumas, or offering myself any compassion. I spent a lot of time working and healing people who are around me. And sometimes, at one point, I shared a story later how on my way to my club where I was bouncing, this was the 80s in New York, someone was following me. And I did that thing where you walk fast, walk slow, see if somebody's following you. You may not know this unless you've seen a lot of detective or thriller movies. And so finally I get this guy, and I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm gonna mug you or something like that. I'm like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, suppose I was your sibling, and we'll get a little bit, because I haven't yet come out as trans, but back then I was a female. And so I'm like, suppose I was your sister or your mother. And so this is a big part of my life story is we end up in a bar sitting down and him sharing with me his stories and me providing him some ideas for how to get out, which included getting a job and what was possible for him. I've spent a lot of my life not looking at the ways that I've suffered and not being able to be with them, not being able to be with my sadness, and being available as much as possible to others. I also grew up in an experience that was very sarcastic. In my family, there wasn't a lot of physical touch. So there was a lot of physical touch. We never talked about anything. We never processed anything. But I was one who was out there learning and taking in as much as I can. And again, offering it out, but never offering it in. I would say by the time I was 9, I started practicing praying. At 9, I started practicing that I would die instead of my mother. And it took me almost 40 years to actually look at how I want to call it passive suicide played out in my life. And that meant getting drunk and writing goodbye notes. I was highly promiscuous, but mostly, I mean, I slept with women. I can count the amount of men I slept with on less than one hand, but I was very promiscuous and out there. Again, like feeling like I was, you know, one of my missions was to show women their beauty and their love and help them to be more sexually exploring and really engage and love their body, something that I couldn't do for myself. So a lot of unworthiness, a lot of not enoughness, a lot of, and it's interesting, I'm thinking about the Four Noble Truths, and I'm thinking about how my suffering didn't necessarily, well, actually it probably did come from the desire for something else to be true. So that because I wasn't active in my healing, I was just creating more suffering and pain for myself. So the desire to see myself as someone else. Growing up in a very multicultural community in the Northeast Bronx, I was sharing in a talk yesterday that I watched my Italian friends get beat up for being Italians. I watched Catholics and Protestants beat each other up for that. I watched my Irish friends being beat up for being Irish. And of course, Black people were being sometimes gang beat up by other groups of white people. I watched my Jewish friends get teased and my Puerto Rican friends. And my experience was that we're all suffering. Everybody's suffering. Everybody's got something that's holding them back. Everybody's got something that's holding them down. And what I never got to, because again, not looking at myself, I never got to look at the degree at which I was suffering as a Black person, or that Black people were suffering at greater levels and deeper levels at times. I forgot to put a timer on. I better put a timer on. Give myself a couple more minutes. That meant I was doing a lot of this, and it took me decades to realize how I was making myself smaller for the people around me. And of course, it plays into my lack of self-worth because I didn't want to look at the ways that I had been suffering more. My experiences at doctors' offices or in schools, where I remember on 2 occasions, once in a school in Northern Virginia and once at San Francisco State University, going in for counseling, to speak to a counselor and tell them I wanted to be a counselor. Like I know what I do well. I want to be a counselor, and on both occasions being told that I should look into public transit. That's a true story. And it took a while before I learned that I wasn't the only person that was happening to. So, yeah, I think like in the almost conclusion of this is this denial of who I was causing me a lot of suffering. The denial of my suffering was causing me a lot of suffering. The inability to be with sadness, which I had been trained into, was causing me a lot of suffering. The ability to work and heal others in a way that was causing me harm. Up until even my mid-30s, I remember with one of my partners, I lent them money so they could pay rent. And then I had to borrow money for my own rent. And yeah, so talking a little bit about, you can probably hear it, the codependency, the Al-Anon in me, the person who still at age 57 is challenged with how to feed myself, when to feed myself, and what to feed myself. It's a painful experience, I will tell you. And let's see what else, if there's anything else. I don't know, that's a lot. I think it's a lot. I want to talk a little bit now about the recovery part. The parts that held me. So when I was younger, the same mother who was excessively controlling and physically abusive, like all the adults in my families that I know of, that I experienced, was one of the most open, loving people. So she's the one that introduced me to a wide array of people. And I would say, like, and always taught me that people were good and people were kind. And there's a song by the Roaches called Everyone is Good. And I kind of, that was like her theme. So that she was introducing me to the police, and Sam was our mailman. And I think Mike was the guy who brought, we had a milk delivery back in New York. So I knew everybody's name, and for the most part, I was able to see the love in everyone. She taught me that. And I don't know that she lived it as much as she taught me to be that way. I used to, there have been moments when I regretted how she taught us to smile. And she taught us to be open and smiling. And I don't know how much of that I needed to learn, because I really was a happy kid. But in this lifetime, it's gained me access to places and experience that I don't think I would have had otherwise. Not to mention, psychologically or physiologically, our smiling sort of keeps our heart open. So I'm really grateful for that. And I don't want to knock anybody. It took me a long time to understand why people weren't smiling, right? Because in some ways I've been living my life up here. And so I didn't really get down to why people were suffering. But keep going with the recovery part. I'm the person who goes outside and flowers scream at me. And so we talk and we play. And I have this way of, the jay supposedly is like the bad bird, but like Jay has like helped me walk through some places where I was scary. And my practice of accepting people as they are has been really good. Not that I haven't, of course, being an Al-Anon person, I've certainly created lots of stories about who you could be. So we should be together now because you could be this person. I've been on both sides of that. But I want to jump to 2012. I got into a coaching training program in 2007. And when I went into this program, what I learned was that it was going to heal me. And I remember going in and saying, I know there's something wrong with me at this point. I don't know what it is. So I'm going to open myself up to this experience. And it was in those workshops that I learned to be with sadness, that I was surrounded by people who were actually telling me that I wasn't taking up too much space. I can't tell you how healing that was. And that I should take more space, actually. And in 2012, I graduated a leadership program, and I discovered a therapist who was a coach. So this person was a coach, and they had also had experience with 12-step. And so if you had known me, you would have assumed I was an alcoholic. I certainly drank enough to look that way, and often enough, frequently, to appear that way. And I never felt like an alcoholic, but I knew that I had all of the tendencies, or many of the tendencies that alcoholics might have, because I grew up in bars, bouncing from 16 to my late 30s. This was my community. That means I made a community in every city and wherever I was. Again, please let me know if you give me a wave if you think I'm going over time. I might need help. But I'm gonna try to stop in like 2 minutes. So at that time is when go ahead.
No, I'm sorry.
I don't have a clock.
We're still listening, and it's we're good for another few minutes. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. So I decided I needed to change some things about. I wanted to change things about myself, and I was in this relationship with this beautiful person, and I remember. I wasn't healing for me. I was healing so I could be in this relationship, which I am so grateful for, because it definitely was torturous for her as I'm going through this excavating and opening and changing. But so I decided I know I can be a better person. I know there's something in me that needs to change. And so I get this coach, and at the same time, I gain a new friend. I had gained a new friend over the year. And this person invited me to go to a talk. I didn't know what it was. I walk in, and there's people in the room. I still don't know what's happening, but I'm there to listen to his talk. And I remember hearing him talk, and he's telling his story, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe this is an AA meeting. I was like, okay, this is cool. I'm listening. And I'm like, but we were just drinking last week. Maybe you can drink in AA, right? Because this is how much I know. He shares a story. The next guy gets on, and he starts talking about how it was taking him, maybe 3 months to buy a desk. And that hit me, along with a couple of other things he said. And at that point, everything that I was like flooded with memories from my youth. It was amazing how much I had hidden and what came up in that talk. So from that day, and shortly thereafter, the partner that I was with and I broke up. I went to Al-Anon every day for almost 9 months, just going to different groups in different cities, sometimes twice a day. There was something about the healing and the hearing the stories, and the being able to look at myself and not wanting to be alone. That was really important. So at this point, I had yet learned about self-compassion. But what I did have with this friend of mine was a reminder to stay with myself. And that was really great. And he didn't have a mindfulness practice at the time. And I'll say the other thing that happened during that time is I was introduced to Abraham, who I want to call one of my first Buddhist teachers. There was a lot of Dharma in what they're saying, and it's complicated. We can talk about that another time, but there was a lot of Dharma in what they were bringing. And it was about being present, accepting what is, and being kind to myself. That was the overall message from Abraham, and it's beneath almost everything. I was also introduced to my coach at the time, introduced me to Jennifer Barizon's Song for All Beings, which you can find on YouTube. And it's a gorgeous video, and it was my introduction to metta. Rolling back a little bit, beginning in 2007, the outward giving person that I am, I had already began giving these, not even talks, but just obviously not a talk. I was putting out these posts on Facebook that were talking about self-love, self-compassion, self-care. I don't remember where it came from, right? Life is cumulative. I can't tell you where all the places it came from. But it was part of who I was becoming known to be. In 2013, I walked into the East Bay Meditation Center. I had been doing a practice in a refuge group outside of there, and they had just moved to a new location. And I walked into the center, and Spring Washam was talking. And at one point in my head, because I'm my best company. And so I jokingly say to myself, oh my God, she must be reading my posts. And of course, she's talking about the Buddha. And she's talking about the Four Noble Truths. She's talking about, at this time, she's talking about compassion and self-compassion. She's talking about self-care. And she's talking about the actuality of reincarnating in our lives, in our lifetimes. And I'm relating to all of this. And at that point, I was hooked. My practice, as I was writing about before, before I even got to EBMC, was finding the power and the gift of awareness through the practice. And that's what I was offering people, that the mindfulness allows you the option of choice. There's nothing for me more powerful than that. And when in later years, maybe a couple of years later, as I'm teaching some homeless folks about this practice, I have somebody say to me, I couldn't help it. I just hit them. And like sometimes I get mad and I just swing, like I just do that. And I remember saying to them, what would it be like if you actually could have a choice? And I said, I promise you, if you do a little bit of this practice, you'll be able to have a little power in choosing the swing. You can swing if you want, but you get to choose. And having them come back to class 6 months later and talk about how they've been practicing. It was amazing. Person was also had alcohol addictions. They were mostly on the street, but actually many people in that group took on the practice that I offered them. So I think I want to stop talking off the top of my head and bring in some of the healing tools that I have that I've created. So what we'll do is, look at that, I talked for a whole 15 minutes. It's a long time. What we'll do is, I want to offer a little meta practice just because I shared a lot and I'm not sure how that's impacting you. So we're just going to do a short meta practice, and then we'll do a mindfulness practice. We'll do 10 minutes. How much time do I have on your clock? Because I literally, wait, let me see if I have one.
It's
about,
about
1:41. Oh, I'm running out of time. I'm talking a lot.
We could spend another I don't know, we could spend another 10 plus minutes if we can get also include just a brief period for questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to offer one of my practices, the one that I thought about offering this morning. Taking and then we'll sit after that for a few minutes. So we'll do this within 10 minutes. Taking into consideration that you all have your stories, and that we're here because we're suffering, and we're here because we have in some way either experienced healing in the practice and through the Dharma, and or believe that we can. So one of my teachers is Brach, and I picked up this practice from something that she was teaching, and it's about allowing ourselves some ease and compassion from the ways that we may hold ourselves accountable for who we were in the past, for our behaviors in the past. Many of us are holding our children captive, our inner children captive, our teenagers captive, even ourselves from a few days ago captive or hours ago. And I believe that we're all always doing the best that we can. And I'm saying that slowly because I know that that's hard to digest. I believe that we are all always doing the best that we can, because we're almost always responding and reacting from our trauma place. So when we're lying, there's a reason that we're lying. We're not just lying because it's fun. We're usually lying because we're trying to hold on to something, or we're trying to, right, to not lose something. When we're stealing, there's a lack of something that's happening that, you know, comes from our past. When we're engaging in behaviors that are shutting us down, it's because there are things that we don't yet believe that we can be with. So I really believe that, and encourage you to investigate that. But let's see if I can. I've got this weird timer thing that won't let me. So I'm gonna give myself a few minutes. We're gonna do this practice and a practice. If you can wave your hand, Robin, maybe when before I have less than 10. How much time do I have? Like 20 minutes?
Well,
all together.
It's 1:45. So and we really should wrap up by no later than 4. I'm sorry, no later than 2. Sorry, I'm on a different
all right,
time
great.
zone.
I'm gonna make it happen. I'm gonna make it happen.
Okay.
I'm gonna make it happen. Here we go.
Okay.
So I'm gonna bypass. Let's see. We got a little bell here. Ding. Sorry, my hands are full. I'm gonna ask you to, if you're comfortable, settle in for a moment. Finding your breath, the energy or feelings in your hands, perhaps finding your feet on the ground, whatever may be grounding for you. And I'm going to begin with this quote. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? And I'll add to that self-loving and self-caring. Going back to the quote, actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God, higher spirit, goddess, creator, whoever works for you. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine, as children do. We were born to manifest the glory of our higher being that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. And that's called Our Deepest Fear from Marianne Williamson. And if you choose to, you may put your hand on your heart as I take you through a very short practice, but I think it's important. I'm hoping this practice will offer some relief and some release for you. And we begin with repeating after me what works and letting go what doesn't. It's not my fault what may have been impacted my being while I was in the womb. It's not my fault if I may have been separated at birth from the one who carried or seeded me. It's not my fault that I may have concerns or difficulty with attaching to others. It's not my fault that I may feel anger about the circumstances of my youth or childhood. It's not my fault if I may feel great or feel nothing at all. It's not my fault if I have experiences of feeling alone or lonely in this life. It's not my fault that I may over-attach or practice ownership over those I love. It's not my fault if I may have been diagnosed with or experience attention deficit disorder. It's not my fault that anyone at any time did not treat me as the gift that I am to the world. It's not my fault if at any time or in any way I was harmed, emotionally, physically, psychologically, or spiritually. It's not my fault. It's not my fault that I have a hard time, if I have a hard time leaving relationships, or if I have a hard time committing to one. It's not my fault if I question if I am worthy or enough. I am enough. I am worthy of my own care and the care from others. I am enough. I am love and I am worthy. So we'll be quiet for just a couple of minutes, feeling anything that may be showing up for you in your body. It can be very kind and calming to touch your heart, your belly, your face. Even holding your thighs in your hands can be calming. I've come to understand that you are the most important person in your experience. And you can know this because you're the only one breathing for you, and you're the only one you can breathe for. There were something like 1 million sperm that came through the vessel that reached the egg, and you won that race. There was a race. You're supposed to be here. The essence of you is love, and compassion for you is possible. Ease and joy for you are possible. So I'm going to practice accepting what is, and not try to beat myself up for talking too much, and the end of my talk here. So thank you for your patience and kindness on my first Zoom talk. I have some working with clocks to do.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I could start us off if that's helpful. This is actually, I think it's a hard question to ask, so maybe it will be difficult to answer. But it's this idea of the loathing and hatred and or dissatisfaction or disappointment that we often feel in life is very attached to us, to self. And that that ego that arises, and because we feel like we're the cause of everything. It's a very egocentric thing to be holding those emotions and those experiences with around the idea of their mind, and that, I think, that really gets in the way of problem solving, or we see ourselves as the problem. So how do we begin to separate that suffering from this experience of me?
So I think taking everything as slowly as it comes up. And as things arise, whatever the suffering might be pointing to or calling or screaming out, the practice for me of being able to be compassionate actually shrinks the ego, because the ego is coming in because it's afraid. It's afraid it's going to be dissolved. It's afraid it's going to be harmed again. And when I can meet my suffering with compassion, and I don't know if this answers your question. It was a long question. It can allow myself a little bit of space, some space to be with it. Is that close to what you're asking?
It is. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to say, when I'm working with as a coach with folks as well, especially artists or musicians, or speakers even, like, the ego is fine. It's a matter of when we're working with it, managing it, or if it's in control of us. That's this is the place where we need to just be clear. When MLK gets up and speaks, or someone else that we admire has got up and spoken, we need our ego to bring us there. But we are in charge of it, right? So my ego gets me in the chair, and then in my wisest space, it goes, and then I want transmission of something higher. But my ego might get me there. Does that make sense? So I actually, giving my ego a job is useful. Because I just want, we shouldn't knock the ego for being an ego. It's a tool. We just have to learn how to manage it. For everybody out there, make 2020 your commitment for insight, 2020 insight, and your commitment for self-love. You matter so much, and we need all of us to heal. So blessings, and thank you again for hosting, Robin, and for making it happen.
You're welcome. Just I'm going to share a link again, and I'm going to read it out loud for the podcast listeners, and that is BuddhistRecovery.org/donate. So by offering what you can as Donna, you're showing support for a network, for teachers, and it really can be, you're helping to grow the recovery community. And it can be a simple and very practical expression of gratitude and metta. So we appreciate you helping to help this network thrive, and we appreciate you being here today. And maybe next month, you'll join us again. We have the first Sunday of April 5th, we'll have Locke Kelly with us. So we'd love to see you there. Meanwhile, have a great March and a really great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Cheers.
Bye.